Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Sorry for the delay there due to technical issues. I hope you will enjoy this session. As announced, we will review quickly the chaos that is affecting us in the cyber landscape. I've tried to structure it, but I know that with these titles, it is not going to make any sense to you as of right now. It will become more clear once we go through it. We will start with some light issues about the focus that we have in cybersecurity, how we tackle challenges, how we solve the wrong problems, in my view, and then we will gradually move into slightly more advanced and technical matters. And finally, I hope to be able to show you an AI demo that fixes a few of the issues that we've discussed. I hope everyone can clearly hear me, by the way. I didn't do a sound check. I see a couple of people nodding. Thank you. Yeah, I'll skip the intro, but because we've already done that. Now, maybe you might wonder, what is BlackBerry doing today in cybersecurity? Or why is somebody from BlackBerry here on stage? We stopped manufacturing devices about 7 years ago, but today have two business units that are focused on cybersecurity and on IoT. And obviously, in the future, we see a convergence of these two fields happening. In our IoT unit, we have an operating system, a hypervisor actually, for the vehicles. The infotainment and other systems are built on top of that. This hypervisor is also being used in smart cities. We have 200 million cars on the road with this system. We announced a partnership with AWS to bring a kind of app store for the connected vehicle of the future, because your experience is going to change. You will sit in the car, you will have screens, you may decide this week or this month, I need XYZ app, and we want to stimulate an ecosystem of application development around that. So from the cybersecurity perspective, we did an acquisition of Sels, the leader in AI-driven endpoint security. There we converge the mobile world protection with, let's say, anywhere working protection and hyper-automation driven by AI. I'll clarify that as we move forward. Now, as I said, there's a lot of chaos affecting our landscape. And ultimately, it's leading to negative business outcomes. It's leading to too much cost, and it's driving even away talent from this field. The chaos has to be seen across multiple dimensions. The first one is the cyber dimension. We have more and more nation states that are investing in offensive cybersecurity capabilities. A recent report by the NSA showed that, according to them, every nation on Earth is now investing in offensive security capabilities. A second element there is that we're all more connected and interconnected with one another. To cut costs, we've ensured that we work with more external parties. We have more data that is being shared. More critical business processes are being supported by these external parties. And of course, that leads to an ever-expanding attack surface. And this has led me in other presentations to say, today, cyber no longer is a human-scale problem. We have too many vulnerabilities, too much data, and even too much input from our security controls to actually give our teams a chance to deal with that. So next up is this slide. And I think we could talk about the data points that are there just for the next hour. But I want to highlight a few, and I will come back to these during the presentation. Notice on the left upper side that we have over 6,000 vendors in this landscape that are creating solutions. The interoperability of these solutions is becoming very difficult. It's also becoming more and more complex to show the value and effectiveness of these solutions because, everybody has certain claims in the market that they're making, but there is nobody that is actually testing the validity of these claims. You will notice that the number of malware samples that are submitted and seen has grown exponentially over the years. So that means that certain defenses that we had in the past will no longer help us, because this is a race against time that we're losing. And that is contributing to the widespread array of negative news that we see. But then a lot of cyber attacks today even go unreported. So we don't even have the correct visibility on the scale of the problem. And so on and so forth. I'll highlight a few of these more later in the talk. But another element that is plaguing us is that whenever you want to make an environment more secure, ultimately you are reducing the productivity of a team. And you are burdening, again, your internal IT and security teams with extra workload. What does that mean? If you think of our security controls, the way we are applying them today will require that we understand the business use, we model that in our security controls, but then when the market circumstances change, the business has a new partner, the business wants to expand into a new market, we have to go through this modeling phase all over again. So we introduce a delay. And this is something that you can really see in startups. They're really agile, but typically they have very low security controls. And as they mature and these two levels kind of meet, the art, I guess, lies in the fact that you find a healthy medium between both, where, okay, the business can still function, maybe not at the speed that they want, and security is, well, not everybody is quitting, saying, okay, I cannot stay here because we are going right for the precipice and there's nothing stopping us. So this is one of the main challenges that we have in the field. How do we break that tension? And how do we get security and productivity to move in lockstep? Then I saw this tweet in 2016, and I very often think back of it. It's the doom and gloom, I would say, of cybersecurity, where you might look at the news and think, is what we are doing impactful? And the other flip side is that some people might say, well, I still get paid. And it might be a vendor, it might be a consultant, might be somebody deriving a salary, but it's a very pessimistic view. I think since this was published in 2016, actually the situation has improved, and we're not at this stage anymore, but it is something that should be cause for reflection. And I often reflect about this one. And then, just to highlight how absurd the situation has become, we have leaders, cybersecurity leaders, that are, in many cases, the top paid individuals in our field, burning out and leaving their appointments within less than 26 months, on average. When you compare that with CIOs, with other leaders, CFOs, they have a tenure that is far longer. 5 years, 6 years, 7 years is typically not unheard of. So this is indicative of a problem between, let's say, executive leadership, the board, and the CISO to prioritize adequately and to fund the program adequately. The second thing is, and this is not a surprise, this spills over into the workforce. Because if the attention of the board is not sufficient that the program is viable, people will think, okay, I don't really feel that there is an improvement being made. We have no chance of fighting this here. And cybersecurity people are passionate. They don't want to just sit around, wait for an accident to happen and watch it in slow motion and then say, well, I told you so. That doesn't help. So a lot of people are burning out. What are we going to do about this situation, and how can we better stimulate certain conversations? I'll highlight a few other problems that I think feed into this that I hope will all help you change some behaviors, some ways of thinking of these problems. We have today a headline obsession with breaches and ransomware. And in my view, and you can quote me on that, breach and ransomware headlines are the Kardashians of our day. You may not follow them, everybody will speak to you about them, and you will know everything about them. But the one thing is, you never learn anything. You never really learn anything. There are no lessons learned from that. I dare you to go back to any of the recent breaches to review that and say, well, this is actually contributing to my mission internally. I know what to do. I can give you one example off the top of my head where actually we learned something, and that was Equifax. The first thing is it was a gigantic breach. More than, I think, 100 million records were leaked. It led to the CEO being replaced, the CIO being replaced, and the CISO being replaced. When new leadership came in, they said, we need to be transparent about our security program, we need to show the weaknesses, and they published a report. And you can read a number of failures that happened, ranging from technical controls that failed. There was one solution that had to do SSL interception. That certificate that was used was expired, so they didn't notice that, and that tool wasn't doing interception, so they lost monitoring capabilities. But there is a wide range of governance issues that predate that. This is the type of information that we need. Think about the airline industry. Obviously, it's world news if an airplane crashes and goes down. People like to read that, I guess. But if you look in the background, what will be happening is that there is a body that is collecting information to say, what was the failure? How did you operate it? Were you within parameters? And then that information gets disseminated to all involved parties or all stakeholders to improve airline safety. We have so much ground to cover to get there in cybersecurity. And I see good initiatives coming with sharing of threat intelligence. My personal view, threat intelligence sharing is a great start, but it's again sharing the wrong type of information. You will be able to stop or prevent or detect certain attacks, but it doesn't tell you anything about all that money being spent on these controls. Well, maybe 30% of them are not effective. Maybe that's really something that needs to be addressed. So I think we can all start by stimulating the right conversations. If somebody comes up to you and says, well, so-and-so got breached, unless you want to have a discussion with their board or of a similar company, that doesn't really help us as cyber professionals. I agree that on a board level discussion, if your main competitor has a big ransomware attack, it will drive some good questions with the board. And that has a bit of value. Well, I mean, that can have tremendous value. But for us, this should be a scientific field. We really need more data so that we can evolve better security controls. Then the second one is that, and this is a result often of these breaches, you will see people say, well, we take your privacy and security very seriously. We've now doubled our budget in security. It's like, fantastic, throw more money at the problem, but you're maybe not taking away the legacy systems. And I often have that discussion with boards and CISOs where I say, push back on the new budget. Give it to IT. Take a cut of 10% of the increase, give that to IT, replace the systems that you're running from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and partner with the business, because in the new version, from 2022 almost, they will gain some benefits. They will be able to go to market faster. They will be able to serve their customers faster. They will be able to increase productivity, production line, whatever you name. So they will be a strong partner for that. That money is better spent on that. Because if you take the increase, but the legacy is not changed within the company, the only thing you will do is 80% of your budget will go to babysitting these separate environments, and you still have a huge risk. So that is another way of looking at it, but it requires active education, both of CIOs, the executives, and the boards. Then we keep speaking about talent shortage, and I have to apologize to you all. I know that the slides are getting meme-worthy, but the past few days, my son has had some health issues, and I've had to decide to invest a bit less time in my slides. But the point still stands. Everybody complains about a talent shortage. But then when you look at it, well, the pay might not be great. And then on the other hand, everybody wants a magical unicorn with certain abilities. But nobody's investing in certain capabilities. I think it was 16 years ago, I built one of EMEA's largest SOCs. At that time, you couldn't find a security analyst. It's not about talent shortage. The skill didn't exist. So we took curious people that had a desire to learn. We gave them a 6-month training program. We said, we'll teach you everything there is about networking. Well, I mean, within reason. We'll teach you OS security. We'll teach you exploitation techniques and all of these things. And then we'll pair you with a senior, and gradually these people became highly effective. So on this front, on the talent shortage, I always want to push back to people saying, we can't find people. I've been looking for this role for 8 months. 8 months! You could have built them yourself. So that is a takeaway that I want to share with you all. If you are in a more junior position, and there's no investment in your career, I think it falls on you to either have that discussion, to push forward in a separate discussion, or to just say, it's maybe not going to happen within this organization. There are other organizations that will help me and where I can grow and move to those. But then the second part as well is today you have conferences like this, you have access to people, we have social media that has brought us many negative things, but one positive is you can almost reach out to anyone in this room with 2 clicks. You have a name, you find them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and you have a discussion. And if they have a somewhat normal personality, they will actually give you good advice as well. So that's a first one, I think. The talent shortage is artificial. It's also reinforced. Remember that stat that we discussed, 6,000 vendors. Now, every vendor comes in with, I have a solution to this problem, but it will require you to operate my solution in a specific way. So you are solving a problem by having to create a new team that has to work with that solution in a particular way. And as that scales, that team grows. Do you see how we are feeding into this problem? And that's something that needs to be changed as well, of course. Then, the serial construction is another problem that I see. What do I mean by that is there are 2 things. If you look at career progression and how that is measured, if you build a bigger team, you can get to a bigger role. So everybody is incentivized to say, I had a stock of 200 people. I had an IT department of 150 people, say. And then in my next role, I have 200 people. When I look at what I did in Dark Matter, I started really as the first employee. We had 3 or 4 people in IT, and I was the IT security guy / CISO. By the end of my tenure, that team had grown to 100 plus. If I compare to my current organization, the combined IT and security team is 450 people plus. Now, I don't want to throw a stone at our CIO and our CISO, but I can tell you that to achieve similar results as what this team is doing, we adopted hyper-automation. If we had to do a task more than once or twice, it became something that was scripted, baked in, and we had a lot of on-prem systems, but we really adopted a CI/CD mentality to say, okay, we have to continuously push out new functions, and then we can automate testing and validate that. So another point on serial construction is, I think I could have made a career going around building SOCs for everyone. And that's a second problem, is that everybody offers you a list, a spec of, well, this is what you need as capability, but there's no instantaneous downloadable framework that you can just implement. What do I mean by that? Even if you look at MITRE ATT&CK, it's a wonderful framework, but you cannot go and say, you know what, I use an open source SIEM, or even for the most common SIEM formats, download a couple of use cases that will tell me you need to send these events, and it's done. The typical way of doing it is you find a few people that have done it before, they come in, they analyze the sources, They have the knowledge on which attacks are important for your environment, and they go through a tuning and planning phase. And typically to gain maturity in the capability is a 2 to 3 year journey. I personally don't understand why you can't say, okay, somebody has done it already, download it, I have 80% capability. Especially if you think outside of the cyber field and you try to explain this to a CEO, let's say you're a mining company, you're a manufacturing company. Why do I need such advanced capabilities? Why do I need to build such teams to build something that's been built 20 times before? In my view, it makes no sense. But coming back to our first tweet, still $. And that's the point, right? Moving on, talent retention. A big point for me. I already mentioned the hyper automation. So we have also all of these events coming in, but we have a tendency to go for tasks in the field that are never ending. Take the example of vulnerability scanning. How many organizations are running vulnerability scans, are running penetration tests, right? Everybody does them. But you have no end state where you go, I'm done. It never ends. I want to show you a different way. I was brought in a Fortune 50 organization after, let's say, a crisis in leadership had happened. And when I started to review what is the data that is being sent to the group CISO, I noticed there was a 2-month lag between data being collected and actions and intelligence being sent up. So I started looking into that. It turned out, okay, we had a relatively large environment. We were scanning 500,000 endpoints on a monthly basis, 100,000 external IP addresses. And it was just so much effort to even update the infrastructure to collect all the information, then aggregate it, that it took multiple teams, several teams, just to wrangle the Excel data and then assign it to the business owners, follow up with them, and all of these things. And I sat down with the engineering and architecture teams and said, isn't this nuts? So, I mean, show me the growth on a graph of the infrastructure, the team, the work that's been happening. And we started looking into this, and I mean, it was almost exponential, right? So I said, okay, we need to redesign our approach. We took a golden image baseline of all our systems. We put that in what we call the patching cluster. So our 500,000 systems were represented by 1,250 systems. We built a database that had all the software packages of all the OSs and applications that were on there. Whether it was Windows or Linux, all the OSs. Then we downloaded all the CVE information in the database. And what we did is every night we ran a file listing on our patching cluster, and we compared that to the information in the database. We built our own little GUI for that. And that instantly, without network traffic, without license, showed us, hey, this vulnerability that's in this package can be patched with this. It's a high severity. This machine maps to 22,000 servers. And then, okay, we gradually sophisticated a bit further. Of the 22,000, 1,000 are used for online banking. That's a really key risk. Then we said, well, that's great that we have quicker information, but the patching itself is always being delayed by the business going, no, we're running a specific important process, don't touch it. So we said, can we get them to sit down, explain to us how they are doing their testing? Can we automate the testing on the patch cluster? And then we'll just patch it, we'll run their tests, functional and otherwise, we'll go back to them, share the results and say, it looks good, your application has passed all your tests, we want to push the button and do it in production. In the beginning, there was some pushback, but ultimately, we were able to achieve it. We saved, I want to say, it's been a few years, it was 2015, but I want to say more than $10 million annually just doing this. People in the team that were, in my view, and I it's not a nice thing to say, but I called them jokingly our Excel slaves. We're now doing something nicer. They could actually dig into the data. They could actually have meaningful conversations with the business to say, this is what we're doing to protect you. And a few people really came up and thanked me and other people on the team to say, hey, this was a great change. This is something that's pushing us forward. So, wanted to share that story with you, because if you give people a never-ending task that is monotonous, is always a repetition, they are going to eventually burn out, as we saw in the stats. Then you can see here how the industry is really focused mostly on response, so after the fact, and very manual. And I think there are a number of things that feed into that. The first one is a lot of your vendors are American. There is a different culture when it comes to legal and compliance there. And I can imagine that for some here, they'd love to take the decision for you, but then the discussion with legal becomes, yeah, but what if the client gets breached and you took a decision and we didn't stop it? They're going to sue us. So everybody is being very careful and saying, well, I don't really know what's happening here. It looks like something happened. Can you go and investigate? The typical stack in an enterprise is 20 to 50 to 60 different vendors. If everybody just inundates you with, well, I don't really know what's happening, you should investigate, all you do all day is investigate. So that becomes a problem, and we need, as an industry, to move more into automated prevention. Then let's talk about innovation in our field, right? And there's always this dual view of any claim that a vendor has to be snake oil. It's marketing, it doesn't work, it cannot apply to us. At the other side of the spectrum, I do think skepticism is healthy. You cannot just accept anything anyone is telling you. But the key problem is that we keep falling into discussions about, well, is this now a new term that is more hype than reality? Is this going to push us forward? And again, we lack the data on effective control testing, so that you can show the results. A secondary point there is that obviously, because we don't test it, we don't have the habit of really well defining the use cases. See if you can spot this pattern. Have you ever had it that somebody talks to you about, oh, I met with this vendor, they're doing something with zero trust, they explain what it is, and then you go, yeah, but that wouldn't work in this one case. And that one case is enough to dismiss it. On this side of the spectrum, maybe it is. Maybe you need to look at the 99 other cases where it actually helps you combat that Sisyphus rolling the ball up the hill without end and without means to win. Because sure, the one case won't work, and it may be a major case, but you might gain a really good benefit in 99 other cases. So that is, I think, something to be mindful as well of. And then I'd like to go into a demo, if the demo gods are willing. Let me see. Oops. No. Here it is. Yes, you can see the screen. So I will, here is the mouse. I will open a victim machine. I'm going to execute some ransomware on the machine, and we're going to see the machine being locked by ransomware. Then afterwards, I will do the test again on a secondary machine where we're running an AI endpoint protection solution, and I'll show you a few things that should be noteworthy. So here, if I'm not mistaken, I can go to, sorry, I first need to take it from here. Yeah, I don't have the right mapping on the other one. Device staging. So I'll quickly copy it from here. Just bear with me 20 seconds. Let's see if I can reach it. Come on. Just a second, please. You know what? I mean, I'll skip the one on the victim machine because it's just locking the machine, and I guess you'll trust me that the sample is correct. I need to find my latest samples, but I have some good samples from ransomware that's been affecting organizations in 2021. Let me just see here. So what you have here is the ransomware that's been making the headlines, coming back to these headlines. We have DarkSide and Conti, which shut down JBS meat producer, and the gas pipe in the US made the headlines in a few other cases as well. I'm going to copy them to this machine, and they should, on execution, be blocked. Let me see. Sorry, since this is not my computer, I'm a bit, yeah, there. Come on. Okay. Hang on. I'll just Control V them. Good, they're on the desktop. I'll open the protection console. Hang on. Come on. Sorry. I'll close this window first. Is it possible to okay, it worked. Let's click this once. There. So you see it's already started to quarantine some files. Now if I click them, I can make it go a little bit faster. It gives me an error message, tells me, hey, that you can't execute this file. That's fine. Eventually, you will see it delete all the files. Now, that's not very impressive, right? 2021 malware from a few months ago being stopped with an antivirus. What's so special about this? Well, the special thing is that this antivirus is the version of our software from 2015. And I can show you that in the console here. Sorry, the mouse is a bit... No, that's not what I wanted. So you see, this is the version from 2015. We do not use signatures. We use artificial intelligence to detect patterns, to detect features, and to say, I don't know what this file is, but I know it looks like something malicious that I've seen in the past that should not be executing. I will quarantine it. And if you think of these side effects that a solution like this has, once you know for sure that it is up and running on all of your estate, you don't need to collect stats on a monthly basis saying, okay, 94% of my signature updates have been performed, and then next month compare it, I have 94, I have 95, which are the business units that are lagging behind, which are the ones that are really doing well, and so on and so forth. So I think this is how you regain some time within the operations, both for the business, because keep in mind that typically in a larger organization, the business has to give you approval to do some patching and all of these things. So you unload the business as well as the IT team, as well as the security team. So this is one way I believe that AI and ML will have a positive impact in the future on our ability to withstand these attacks in a smarter way. And then, just to close off, after the demo, here we are, and I'll take this one. Yeah, that's not gonna come true, sorry. 2 icons didn't come true, sorry for that, but what we built is a platform that, and I'm just showing this as an example, to stimulate your thinking. It's not meant fully to be a plug for my employer, but just to show you how we are tackling a few of these challenges, is that we have one platform that is multi-modular, where we ensure the interoperability of these modules. If you have our desktop protection, you have our threat hunting, you have the endpoint management solution, well, if this one gets updated, this one will still be able to talk to it, which is not guaranteed if you have 20 solutions from 20 different vendors. I believe the future is this, and you are seeing it with competitors in the market as well. They are moving to larger platforms, and maybe in the future even platform as a service, where you consume capabilities as and when you need them, maybe on a monthly basis or once a year, and so on and so forth. Then, just to come to zero trust, as I mentioned it, one way that we then have that is unique, by having everything combined in a platform, we generate data, or we acquire data from the state of the applications, the state of sessions. Is Peter now in finance all of a sudden working at 4 a.m., whereas typically he works from, 7 till 3? Is he connecting from different networks? Do we notice that a left-handed person is all of a sudden using a mouse with the right hand? All of these deviations from a known standard baseline can lower a trust score that is continuously monitored. And therefore, we used to say it's zero trust, but we're now evolving in the company towards continuous trust, because zero trust is a bit negative, but where we can offer a continuous overview that, yes, you are in a safe environment, and if not, we can dynamically adapt policies based on what we're seeing. That might be, let's say that the network changes, or the state of the application security changes. If it's a radical jump down in trust score, we might actually say, you know what, we limit the access to certain sensitive applications. But as soon as you, reconnect to your approved home network, you regain these rights. You don't have to go to IT. IT doesn't need to install something, but you can just seamlessly work. Think back of that productivity and security curve. It's enabling people to do their job while we try and secure it as much as possible. And I just want to show you that, I just wanted to show you this to say, okay, I'm not just here ranting about some problems that we all are faced with. We're actively trying to solve them. And I'm not going to lie, we're not the only ones actively trying to solve them. But try and have that discussion within the ecosystem if you are looking at solutions. Try and look at, am I buying something, acquiring something that will create all of the problems that we talked about? Or is it actually going to allow me to just achieve a better level of security and move forward? And then, just on the AI, because I showed it, maybe a few of you are curious on how does it work within that one module that we saw. We've built a database of tens of millions of files, and they are both malicious and benign. And you have to do that because if you only train an ML model on malicious software, anything that it encounters would be blocked. So you would have false positives, and you will impact the business. We extract features from these, and I'll explain that in a minute. We then vectorize these, use them to train the algorithm, and ultimately that results in a clustering of feature vectors and a classification of feature vectors. Now, if I walk you through what that looks like with animals, a characteristic might be the shape of ears, the position of the ears, all of these type of things. And if we compare two animals, they will have distinct characteristics. And even things that we as humans might interpret as a big difference might be completely different with an algorithm. But here in this sample case, we see that the scoring that we receive is, to my surprise, I would say, well, probably the ears are the most distinguishing feature. Here in our example, we see that the nostrils, I think, is the biggest difference, if I'm not mistaken. So, expressed as a feature vector, you receive something like this. Then you can plot this in what in data science is called a t-SNE space and representation, and you can start clustering. Now, this brings up a question about the data quality. If the clustering that I have here in front of you is to decide, are these animals appropriate for my son to play with? Well, then maybe I really want to be sure that my group of cats doesn't contain panthers, lions, cheetahs, and so on and so forth. If it's just, okay, I want to separate dogs from cats, yeah, that might be fine that that's in there. If I make the bridge to our malware and our business applications, you get something like this. The number of features that go into your model and into your representation will mean that A, it's harder to bypass, B, that it will be more robust towards the future, and the efficacy will improve. Now, let's leave the t-SNE representation and just walk you through that feature training. So you start with the vectorized feature sets. You then, as I said, start clustering them, and you eventually will get a classification to say everything below a certain point is considered to be normal. Everything above are clusters of malicious things. Now, something new comes in. I don't know what it is, but the algorithm knows that it looks a lot more like this due to where it's positioned than that. I'm not going to let it run. So if you look back at the demo I showed you, that's exactly what happened. The algorithm, of course, didn't know that malware that came out in, I think in one of the cases it was 2019, that would exist. It's not that we're predicting malware, but we have a set of characteristics, features that show us that, hey, this is a file that we don't want to execute on that machine. And this, I think, is a big evolution that we can take in a number of security controls to reduce some of these pain points that I talked to you about today. And yeah, then I'll skip this one, or no, I think we have time. The DoD presented a model to say, well, actually, there are different stages of maturity within ML. And I know a few people might say, yeah, but we've had machine learning, we've had heuristics and all of these things. And then you fall somewhat more on this spectrum where you have a small number of features being looked at. You have small number of samples to work with. And as you move towards here is where you get the deep learning, reinforced learning, all of these things, where it becomes even more autonomous, less involvement from the human data scientists in creating the model. And you can even get suggestions on new models that can be good. Maybe for the completeness sake, we train our algorithms in a cloud. That cloud is not the one that, let's say, is executing the model. So we push the model to all the endpoints in what is called edge computing. And in edge computing, the decision is being made on the edge because you have an actual representation of the model. So if something comes in, the features get extracted, and it's then in real time that the decision is being made. The good news is this also works without cloud connectivity. If you have an air-gapped system, you have particular needs, you can still have that protection there, and no need to update it. So this is, I think, a nice benefit. And then this is a slide that I've left in. Remember the slide on skepticism and the slides on snake oil. If I had started, actually I should have tested it. If I had started and said, well, we have something that we call a predictive advantage, that means that, well, let's take DarkSide. 67 months ago, our product would have stopped DarkSide. That type of claim would have made your snake oil sensor buzz off. You say, well, that's not possible, I don't understand, you're making up things. Now that you've seen it in action, you can qualify it a little bit more. And I know some people will still be skeptical and say, yeah, but the sample might have been specifically prepared or the solution prepared, and I want to test it myself. These are fair comments. But again, just want to come back to that point that I made earlier. And that concludes the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.